Thank you. This is Search Marketing Now, broadcasting live from our home base here in the New York area. As Tim mentioned, I am Chris McDonough, and on behalf of the Search Marketing Now webcast team and Optify, our sponsor, thanks for joining us for Align Your Marketing Mix to Your Buyer's Journey with an in-depth discussion on the solution search stage. Before I turn things over to Christine and Erez, I want to be sure to tell all of you in the audience a couple of things to make sure your viewing is perfect today. If you need some help or you have a question for us or for our speaker, please just use that Ask a Question box, and we will do our best to help you out. I have a couple of widgets at the bottom of the page for you to check out. You can email a friend about this webcast. You can check out our speakers' bios. You can also check out Optify and SMN. And that would be, all you have to do is click on one of those little widgets at the bottom and move right over to check everything out. We are recording this broadcast, and we will make it available for viewing later on this afternoon. I will let you know when it's ready, or just check our website at searchmarketingnow.com and look under the on-demand section. All right, with all that business taken care of, I am going to start us off today with our first polling question. It is, has your sales cycle changed over the past 12 months? No change, gotten longer, disrupted by prospects who disengage but come back later to buy, shorter, and prospects are very informed when they contact us, or changing and we're not sure how or why. Just go ahead and hit one of those radio buttons on the left side. You'll see it turns a little bit blue, then hit Submit Answer. Now, while I give you all a chance to answer that, I'm going to formally introduce our first speaker today, Christine Crandell. Christine is a B2B marketing and strategy expert with more than 20 years' success in driving demand crafting, market-shaping vision and strategy, and building brands for leading technology organizations. Her approach to marketing and strategy has led to a recognition as one of Silicon Valley's most influential women for 2010 by the Silicon Valley San Jose Business Journal. All right, Christine, I am just about ready for you. I am going to push out the results to the poll, and it looks like we've got, pretty interesting chart here. Mostly no change. Sales cycle hasn't changed over the past 12 months, so hopefully we can help them along their way with your discussion on the solution search stage. And I'm going to go ahead and push out your first slide and get you going. You ready to go?
I am, and thank you, Chris, and welcome everybody. Really interesting on those poll results, and while lots of you said, I think it was 35% of you said that there was no change, the rest of you, which is, about 60%, said that there was something going on. And what's really happening is that the world's changing, and I know we all know that, right? We've all been saying that to each other now for quite some time. But out of that, in terms of business, there's a new set of rules. So the buyer, and you're going to find that I use the word buyer to mean prospect, to mean customer, to mean target market. So I kind of use the word buyer as a generic phrase, and we'll talk about that a little bit later. But buyer's in full control, not just about the process that they go through to buy stuff, but also about that customer relationship. And so this notion that a customer is going to stick with you and gets locked in is today a myth. And that's regardless of whether you're selling SaaS cloud software, capital equipment, or shoes. Okay, all customers are buyers. Even if they just bought, they're still out there evaluating their alternatives. They're out there evaluating the solution that they bought. They're out there evaluating that experience. But not all buyers are customers. And so we all really need to treat everyone as if they're a buyer, as if they're continually in that buy mode. And so you're going to see that from now on going forward, I don't use the word prospect. I'm going to use the word buyer. And secondly, the experience that the buyer wants and is having is a major decision element in their purchase decision. Every buyer has an experience with you, regardless if you craft one for them or if you leave it to chance. That experience is shaped by word of mouth, your social media interactions, your content, all of those things. And every buyer also has an ideal experience in mind that they want. And so how you understand and how you deliver that experience is where the buyer's journey methodology actually comes in. So let's talk about what the buyer's journey is. It's a methodology, and it's a set of organizing principles that helps you to decipher and align marketing, sales, and customer service to your buyer's self-directed journey and their expectations. I look at it as a roadmap to transforming into a social business, and every target market that you pursue, and also all of the roles that you talk to, or the personas, if you're into persona marketing, has a unique buyer's journey. But at the highest level, they pretty much map out into 3 stages. And so we're going to walk through those stages, and then we're going to start to drill down. So you're going to see us walk down into detail for the rest of this webinar. So that very first stage, which is colored yellow, is the buyer enablement. So this is pre-purchase. This is where what you're finding, and what some of you are finding in your survey results, is that about 75% of that purchase cycle, that pre-purchase cycle, right, that buy cycle, is completely invisible to you, and it's out of your control. And that's why we say that social, that buying today in the B2B world and in the B2C world is social, it's trust-based, it is self-directed, and it's transparent. It's transparent to the buyer, but it's not transparent to you. So this buyer enablement phase, this very first stage of the buyer's journey, is really focusing on understanding what's happening in those steps. And part of this webinar is we will actually drill down into one of those steps. And if you understand where your buyers have gone, who they've talked to, what they're looking for, what their expectations are, what's the experience that they want, you can align to your buyer. And the nice part about it, the result is you're going to wind up having very high-quality leads. The second part of the buyer's journey, which is number 2, is purchase. And I think we all know what goes on in the purchase stage, right? So we have validation of the decision that the buyer has. They work with sales in order to understand what the terms and the conditions are. We all know what happens in purchase. The third stage of the buyer's journey, which is the number 3, is buyer engagement, right? This is post-purchase. And here is where you're understanding and you're aligning to your buyer's expectations of value, of engagement, and of experience. And those 3 things, understanding what they want and how they want to be treated after they've been purchased, spells the difference between churn and customer-initiated word of mouth. So let's kind of step down into the stages at a really high level and talk a little bit more about what is in each one of those stages. So I'm going to start off in the bottom where it says problem definition. And problem definition is basically where someone in the market, someone in the company wakes up one morning and raises their hand and says, there's got to be another way. So this is a trigger point. This is not the 0 moment of truth or ZMOT, but it's really that trigger point, that change, that tipping point that something has happened, right? It could have been an equipment failure. It could have been a lost order that has costed the company money in terms of litigation. It could be a number of different things. But this is problem definition. This is where there's recognition and acceptance that there's a problem within the organization, along with organizational commitment to solving that problem. And what's interesting with the buyer's journey is we begin at the beginning, at the trigger point. We don't begin at the point of contact between the buyer and the vendor because, at that point, it's a little bit too late in the game. So we start at the very beginning. What happened? What caused that trigger point to happen? What's the level of pain or the benefit that's involved? And how is the organization wrapping its head around solving that problem or not? Okay, sometimes they choose not to solve that problem. Let's say, for instance, they choose they're going to go ahead. We recognize it's a problem. We have organizational commitment. To solving this problem, we're now going to go to solution search. So in this particular stage, it's not about running out and going and finding, the first SaaS application you can go find, right? It's really now still in the organization. But what the organization does, it says, I'm going to put together a team. I might not put together some budget. I'm going to, however, spend a lot of my time on problem investigation. What's the root cause? What are the alternatives? What are best practices? I'm going to go talk to my peers in the industry and my colleagues. I'm going to find out, do they have this problem? how did they solve it? What did they do? I'm going to go check out blogs and communities. I'm going to bone up on the subject matter and really try to understand what is the state of this situation in other organizations like mine, and what have these other organizations done in terms of going to solve that problem. And at the very end of it, okay, before you get into the evaluation stage, buyers are going to settle on, this is the approach that I want to take to solving the problem. These are some expectations of outcomes that I may have when I solve this problem, right? And then they're going to launch into the third stage, which is the evaluation stage. So here they're going to dig into solve, the approach. They're going to look at the requirements definition. They're going to look at alternatives, and they're going to start to look at vendors. Here's where you have the zero moment of truth kicking in. This is the point of first contact. It could be in a blog. It could be more likely in a webinar. It could be at an event. It could be in a number of different places where you have that initial point of contact. But it's really focused on, from the buyer's perspective, I have my requirements. I understand what my expectations are of value. I'm going to start looking at vendors. I'm going to start exploring what other people in my community are saying about that product and about that vendor. Again, so they're turning out to their communities. And from there, they're going to go through this process. They will engage with you on the marketing side on a number of different points, but also they're going to be networking with current and former users of your solution and product, and they may even sign up for a free, a freemium or a trial or a demo or something like that. But they're checking you out is the bottom line, and they're doing their research. When you get into the validation stage is where the buyer typically starts to engage with sales, and at this step, they want to validate what they've heard is actually correct. So they're matching what your sales organization and what marketing or inside sales is telling them with what they have actually all heard through problem definition, solution search, and the evaluation stage. And so they're going to want to talk to references and a number of other sources, because now their attention is going to start to turn to what is the experience like if I am a customer, right? I said the C word. I said I wasn't going to say it, but there it is. I said it. So they want to know, what's that post-purchase experience going to be like, and does it match? Does it match what I'm looking for as a buyer and what I deem to be as value? But I'm going to go and step back here, and we're going to start to dive into solution search, which is the topic of this particular webinar, and we're going to get down into it. We chose to zero in on this because this is where, of all the stages, this is where you have a significant amount of ability to impact your buyer's cycle, your buyer's journey, and to accelerate your revenue cycle. If you do this right and you match up what the buyer is expecting with your marketing assets, your content, and your marketing programs, you actually can influence this deal and you can accelerate the cycle. So let's go a little bit more into solution search. In this step, this step is not about looking for a vendor, but it's about understanding the problem's root cause, exploring best practices, and learning how peers have addressed this challenge and the outcome they've realized. So it's all about doing that necessary homework to help buyers understand how they might want to approach this problem or this particular opportunity. So I call it, it's basically all about that homework, right? And so what are they going to go do? So in this step, the buyer is going to go to multiple websites. They're going to go to social communities. They're going to go to industry groups and analysts. They're going to go to and talk to community peers. They might go around to the corner to talk to one of their buddies in the neighborhood. They'll even attend a webinar, some conferences, as they gather information. So the operative word here is I want to understand root cause of the problem in my organization. The second operative word here, or words or phrase, is gather information about how others have achieved the desired outcome or solved that problem. So at the end of this step, okay, the organization is going to agree on a target outcome, because, and again, buyers buy outcomes. Solutions are the path to the outcome. They're buying an outcome, and they're going to look at success metrics and approach and any particular constraints that they need to compensate for in the solution and in the outcome they're going to go and get. So it's all about the homework around that problem. So how do they go and do that? So let's sort of talk about how do they go do that? Because it's really interesting. The process and the challenge that you have, right? And it's really not that hard. But the challenge that you have is you need to discover that process because they're not sharing it with you. They're not going to call you up and say, hey, I'm going to go do these 5 steps, and help me out here. Go along the way. What you need to do is you need to go and discover it. And so this is the process you need to go through. You need to understand and identify what are they looking for, right? And again, remember it's buyers and it's role-based. So what are they looking for? They're looking for information. They're looking for lessons learned. They're looking for best practices. They're looking for data, right? So what are they looking for? Where do they go to? That's the destination. What are the websites they went to? What are the conferences they went to? Who did they talk to? Did they talk to the industry analyst? Did they talk to a reporter? Did they talk to references? Did they talk to peers? Who did they talk to? What actions did they take on what they've learned? And what lessons did they learn? And so they're going to go through this discovery process in the solution stage, and your challenge is to go and discover that discovery process. And how do you go about doing that? The old-fashioned way. You're actually going to go talk to your prospects, and you're going to talk to your target markets, your named accounts, your customers, new ones and old ones, and you're going to ask them those questions. Help me understand. Help me understand how you went about deciding that this is the approach that you wanted to take, and have them walk you through that process. Where did you go? Who did you talk to? What did you do? What did you learn? Where did you go? Who did you talk to? What did you do? What did you learn? And you're going to find they're going to be very specific and very open-minded and open with you because they start to understand if you're asking those questions, you really want to do a better job in helping serve them. So let's kind of zero down and a little specifically use this slide as a little bit more of a cheat sheet in terms of making sure you ask them the right sets of questions, right? Where did they go? So these are some of the places that you're going to find, or at least that in our experience we found, that buyers go in that solution search stage. And again, keep in mind that they're looking to understand how did other people solve this problem or not, all right? And what were the outcomes that they realized? So it's pretty expansive in all the places that they go. They're not in a buy cycle. They're not ready to go give you money and buy something. They are, however, very ready and very eager to consume information and to consume examples. And so, you really want to make sure that you understand where they went and you're there. You understand who they talked to, and those people are briefed on what it is that you do, and you talk in terms of outcomes. You talk in terms of success metrics, not the hows, not the technology involved, not that sort of stuff, but what was the outcome? The outcome is I accelerated revenue by 5X. The outcome is I was able to cut 10 months off of this construction project. And once you've gotten all that information, the best thing to do is to lay it out on a very longitudinal path, because the buyer's journey happens over time, right? So as you've gone through and you've asked them, where did you go, who did you talk to, what did you learn, what did you do, where did you go, who did you talk to, what did you learn, what did you do, what you're going to do is you're going to take all that information, you're going to now lay it out on a timeline, and you're going to do it by role. So in the slide, we have to have one stream of a longitudinal sequence of actions. And in reality, you're going to have maybe 3 of these, right? One's going to be the economic buyer, one might be the CIO, one might be the project manager, whatever is, depending on your solution. But you really want to understand longitudinally, where did they go? What's the sequence, and where did they go? And we're having a little fun in this. And in this sequence here, you see someone went to an industry association, they went to LinkedIn, they went to a social community. This actually is a real-life example. They went to talk to industry analysts. They then went to webinars, and then they went and talked to somebody's uncle, honest to God, because the uncle happened to have been in the business, and they went downloaded a white paper, and this is how they were starting to learn how other peers in their organization solved this problem. And so that's at a really high level of what goes on in solution search and what goes on in that buyer's enablement portion of the buyer's journey. Now, the folks from Optify who are super smart are going to really drill down into what you can actionably do in the solution search stage. But I get a lot of questions that I kind of want to address with this next slide, in which people say, well, why would I want to go do this, right? This seems like an awful lot of work. It looks like a lot of work, but it's actually not. Why would I want to go do this? And I'm going to give you a really simple 2 data points. These are real live data points. You can accelerate your sales cycle by 3 to 5 times. 3 times on the initial net new buy, 5 times on repeat sales or expansion sales, right? It works. Additionally, you can reduce your cost of sales dramatically. You can do that in 2 ways. By matching your marketing assets specifically and directly, one-to-one, to your buyer's journey, you're going to find that you don't need 50% of the marketing stuff that you already have. And also, you're going to find that your sales model and your go-to-market model will also change and become much more streamlined because you are where your buyers are with what they're looking for when they're looking for it. And that's why companies are starting to rapidly go through this process, because they realize that this is the only way they're going to go and grow. So I think we have a poll coming up, because I'm really interested in this poll. And let me see here. There you go. And so in this poll, it says, where do your prospects go before they contact you? So this is sort of a quick, let's take a couple of seconds to fill out this poll. I'm really interested in this because this really sets us up for the rest of the conversation to help us know just how well you know where your buyers are going before they actually initially contact you for the first time.
Okay, so your options are not sure at all of where they go. Bummer. Hopefully that's not the case. Next, believe that contact industry analysts and read media sites. Believe they contact industry analysts and read media sites. Somewhat sure of the websites they visit and who they talk to. Completely understand their purchase decision process, or they come straight to us. Wouldn't that be great, huh? I'm going to give all of you guys a chance to ponder that and answer that question. And in the meantime, I am going to formally introduce Erez Barak, who I did not say hello to at the beginning of the broadcast. I'm sorry, Erez. It was not intentional. Hello, Erez.
Hey, Chris. Hey, everyone. Thanks for joining.
Well, welcome, and thanks for being here. But let me tell the audience a little bit about you first. Erez is the VP of Products and co-founder at Optify. He is a frequent speaker at industry events. He was named among the top 25 innovators in 2010 Seattle Business Magazine. And Erez, I would also like to take this opportunity, since we have a few more seconds, for you to tell our audience a little bit about Optify as well, and then we'll go ahead and push those results out.
Thank you, Chris. Again, thanks, everyone, for joining. Just a few words about Optify. Optify is really about enabling you as a marketer to drive more traffic and leads using SEO and social media. As those visitors and leads come in, help convert them to customers, help keep those customers engaged, and as you do that, measure and share results within your organization and with others out of the organization. Optify customers typically see over 100% increase in organic traffic and over 300% increase in leads in less than 4 months. The best way to get to know Optify is go to optify.net. The best way to really try out Optify is try our 14-day free trial. So you're more than welcome to do that.
All right. Thanks, Erez. And audience members, I've made it easy for you to check out Optify. Again, you can push one of those little widgets on the bottom of the page that says Optify. And if you would like a 14-day trial, please make sure you submit that in the Ask a Question box, and I'll make sure I get that information over to Erez right away. All right, Erez, here you go with the results of our broadcast. Looks like split up pretty much the top 3. And not too many people have people coming straight to them, unfortunately, for them.
And I think that's the most important takeaway looking at these results. We need to keep in mind, no matter how great our website is, how great our content is, the buyer starts their journey much earlier. The buyer looks around. The buyer learns from content that's not necessarily on your website. And they go to specific websites. We'll talk about that. And they talk to analysts and peers in order to understand what the best solution is. but looking at or viewing the buyer from a lens of, well, once they hit your website, they're probably ready to start evaluating and validating your product rather than this is the start of their search, really helps understand the context of the buyer's journey. So let's dive into this, and I'm going to try to focus on your actions as a marketer during the buyer's journey. How do you align your solution to the state of mind of the buyer as well as their needs? And just to frame this, Christine did a great job of talking about the buyer's journey, and we're going to focus on this. I call it the first piece, the solution search. Note, this is where marketing kicks in. When I'm defining my problem, frankly, marketing is not very helpful there or cannot reach that point, but I can start very early on in the customer solution search. So we chose to say, well, as a marketer, start thinking early. Thinking early means thinking in terms of the solution search stage. Keep in mind that this is where a buyer really wants to understand how peers solve the problem, wants to understand what solution alternatives I had. Keep in mind, I'm not using the word vendor, or I'm not using the word tool, or I'm not using the word product just yet. This is more about the research that gets me to start evaluating. It's about reading case studies. It's about watching videos, learning more, and perhaps registering for a webinar, just like this one, while you're in your buyer's journey. So that's why we sort of decided, well, as a first step, let's take a deep dive into the solution search stage. We did some prep for this webinar and thought, okay, what's a good problem to look at? And we wanted a simple problem, and we wanted one that really highlights what how the buyer thinks and the marketer thinks. And we thought of, well, someone just got a new job. And I got a new job. I'm really excited about it. Turns out dress code is a bit more formal than I'm used to. Heck, I even have to wear a tie, so I hear. So my problem really starts by getting a new job. That's a good thing. But now I have to understand how to tie a tie. I have no idea how to do that. My starting point is, well, how do I solve that problem? So there are two dimensions or two ways to view this. One is the buyer. As a buyer, I want to understand the root cause. I want to learn what peers did. I'm prepping for the evaluation of a product, but I'm not there yet. As a marketer, well, I want to convert you to a lead. I want to make sure that when you're a lead or a contact in my system, I identify you as someone who is in the solution search stage. You don't want to get it wrong, right? You don't want to throw a product at the buyer when they're still in solution search. Very confusing. I want to collect as much data as possible about you as your contact, your basic personal information, where you work, if relevant, where you are in social networks, where you're active, are you on Facebook, are you on Twitter, are you on LinkedIn? Collect as much data as possible, and then segment the set of contacts to really highlight those contacts that are in the solution search. So let's dive into the specific activities from a buyer standpoint, and then more importantly, or just as important, from a marketer standpoint. So first thing I do, well, I'm going to gather best practices. I got to see what's out there. I want to learn more about tying ties. I want to learn more about the problem area. That's me as a buyer. As a marketer, what I should be thinking now is, well, he's gathering best practices, or she's gathering best practices. Well, I might as well offer those best practices. Not my product, not my solution yet, but just best practices. So what or the how is really, well, write, produce, and offer this free content. Typically, it's free content when it comes to a best practice. People don't want to pay for that. As they research, they want to learn. You want to optimize that content for search. You want to syndicate that content. Remember, they're not hitting your website on day one. They're going to go to other websites to find content about this. And then, of course, optimize this content for that next step when they come into your site. Where do you do this? Your site and blog. Some will make it there. Search engines. Social networks. Most of the time is spent there. You want to make sure you're syndicating the right set of best practices there. You want to talk about, or in relevant trade shows and conferences. You want to be in relevant trade publications, and you want to make sure you use specific syndication networks to really get those best practices out. In terms of measuring, you start measuring, well, how many contacts are coming in for research? How many page views do they have? How many downloads of best practices or best practice related information am I getting from my website and from those other syndicated or syndications? So we're through best practices. I get it. I know what can be done. I know what's right and hopefully what's wrong. Next, the buyer is collaborating. I'm going to ask my friends how to tie a tie, or what's the best solution for me. I'm going to ask experts around this area and make sure I get answers from there. People, buyers, trust other buyers. Trust other buyers on that same journey that may have gone through this path, and that's where you really want to get in the conversation. Again, as a marketer, what you want to do is not say, hey, I am that expert, because you're not considered that expert yet. You're not considered a peer. What you want to do is evangelize those peers. You want to make sure that others tell your story for you. Again, you don't do this in one day, but you want to make sure that the content is out there and relevant for them. So what you do is you encourage shares, you encourage likes, you encourage tweets and retweets. So people are telling your story on your behalf. You develop an evangelist program. You encourage word of mouth within your organization. You offer up case studies. This is the time. These guys, check out their case study. They really know what they're talking about. And you participate in the industry discussion on the topic. Again, you don't talk directly to the buyer. You're going to go places where the buyer is going to look for peer data. It's private and public industry communities. It's consultant websites for best practices. A third-party consultant is really trusted at this point of time. It's different review sites, and of course in Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter is where you want to be at this time. What do you measure to make sure you get this right? Well, you want to measure the sentiment, the positive and negative reviews. And you can also measure NPS, which is the Net Promoter Score, which really tells you how excited people are about your solution and what they tell others about. Okay, so I understand the best practices. I asked around. Next, I'm ready to understand possible outcomes. What can come out of this? Well, I may learn how to tie a tie. I may say, forget it. I can go in other formal. I don't need to have a tie for formal dressing. I could go with a bow tie. There's a lot of options for me, and before I start evaluating, I want to understand those options. Again, I'm a buyer. As a marketer, you want to lay out those options. Educate on the possible outcomes. You typically want to educate on the possible outcomes that you can serve and make sure there's an alignment there. This is where Q&A becomes key. This is where frequently asked questions, FAQs on the topic really become relevant. I already know what to ask as a buyer. Well, help me out and give me the answers. Free assessment tools, free trials, ROI calculators, simulations, all help me understand the possible outcomes as I assess a solution, as I'm thinking of those possible outcomes. Where do I do this? Site, blog, and user community are key here. Having a great user community really helps you answer the questions, actually facilitate the discussion. Webinars are key here, and I really like to highlight this Q&A sites. You're seeing the eHouse, Ask.coms of the world, also Quora lately, and places like YouTube and Q&A where a lot of discussion is happening. This is where the buyer goes to understand, well, what can come out of this. I ask a question, I get an answer, I read past answers, and hopefully they all align to what I'm able to offer the buyer. So I get the best practices, I ask the right people, I understand the outcomes. Now I'm going to discover different solution alternatives. What can I do to solve this problem? How do you position yourself as a solution alternative? Well, first and foremost, on your site, make sure you are defined as a position alternative. That then helps others define you as a solution alternative on places like Wikipedia. That helps search engines align you with the right set of solution alternatives. When you go to trade shows, when you have expert bloggers, they talk about you as a solution alternative. As you make that tie, it really helps you get on the short list of that buyer. So again, it's really aligning those goals for the buyer. And just let's take a peek at the summary slide of sort of what you do during the solution search is make sure you align with the objectives. They're looking to understand root cause and learn what others have done. What you want to do is, again, identify the stage, segment them properly. While they gather best practices, you want to make sure you offer those up. When they try to collaborate, and they will, make sure you have peers that are evangelists or people talking about your solutions and how it solves our problem. Not you, but others. You want to, when the buyer wants to understand possible outcomes and discover the solution alternatives, make sure you're there to educate on possible solutions and also highlight yourself as a solution alternative. Once someone or a buyer goes through this stage and is in the stage summary, what you really need to be thinking, and this is my final slide before we hit the takeaways, is what do I do with the buyer at that point? Well, what action do I take? How do I nurture them to that next step? How do I get them to start evaluating and validating me as a solution? Well, as the buyers come in, as you start collect them, as you start nurturing them, make sure you identify their main interests. You segment them using not only their profile, but also their interest and behavior. You score them based on that behavior and profile. The communication going out to them has to be aligned with the segment and personalized. Be very aware of when they mature and say, well, I get it. I'm ready to pick a solution. Because that's when you want to encourage them to move to that next stage where they actually start evaluating you as one of the products and as one of the solutions that come in. So just to wrap this up, Christine and I put a few key takeaways together. I think, looking at the two parts of the webinar, we have to understand as marketers that buying is social. It's trust-based. It's self-directed, and it's transparent. And the world is evolving in that direction. The world, frankly, is there, but keeps evolving in that direction. Once you understand that self-directed journey, you can now align your marketing and your marketing efforts to that journey. So once you align your roles and your activities to where your buyers go, that's where you gain most trust. You also want to make sure you design your programs to be role-specific in order to leverage unique steps for those roles. And as a final takeaway, enable your buyers. Give them valuable information and give it to them for free. Build credibility as they go through the journey. And as you all stated, they don't necessarily go to your website at the beginning of that journey. Make sure that when they get there, they have the credibility and trust to enable them to choose the right solution that you provide for them.
Thank you, Erez. How are you? Again, and Christine, are you there? We'll bring you back in for the Q&A part of the broadcast.
Yes, I am here.
Terrific. I'm going to get going right away. We've got some questions in the queue, and I'm going to push out the first one for you now. Are there published industry standards that demonstrate the value of optimizing the buyer intent? And you can see the examples there. Anybody want to grab that one?
Could
you want to grab that one, Christine, or you
want me to read it again?
I can start it, and then maybe you can jump in. Yeah. Because I think one of the things I really want to stress on this is that it's dependent upon, it's different for every industry, it's different for every company, it's different for products, right? So there aren't set standard benchmarks to say if you follow this process, you're going to have, a 20% increase. Data that has been gathered so far, my own personal data from our clients that have been gathered so far is that we measure pipeline because we're really zeroed in on the impact it has on the business. So we look at pipe, we look at velocity, and we look at those types of things. I would venture to say, though, that the clients that we have would not be representative of everyone in the universe, so it's not necessarily generalizable. And the reason that I say that, and again, I would look to the Optify team to provide their view, is that buyers are different. When you get into this buyer's journey, you're going to find that if you sell a SaaS application to a CFO, and that is a mid-sized company, and you're selling a different kind of solution or product to a CFO, that buyer, that same CFO, is going to go through two different sets of journeys. It's not the same set of journey, and that's why Erez did a great job of pointing out it has to be role-based, right? So you really need to understand what's that guy, let's call him John or Betty, and what's Betty and what's John going to do, and where do they go through. When you've gone through and done that kind of a level of analysis, then you're able to be in a position to say, let me go back and look at my marketing operations. Let me go look at what I can go do, and I can go and then begin to give those metrics. And this is where I'm a huge fan of big data, because if you've taken everything you've got and you've dumped it into a big data system to look for patterns and trends, right, at the very beginning, all right, when you're looking to discover the buyer's journey, go back at when you have the data and do the exact same exercise again, and you're going to find two things. One is you're going to find the answer to your question, okay, for that point in time. The second thing you're going to find is that your buyer's journey has actually changed. It changes over time because, look at the web. Years ago, MySpace was hot, and today it virtually doesn't exist. And today, LinkedIn or Twitter is hot or Facebook's hot, and who knows what it will be, 2 years from today. So your buyers are evolving just as much as your own marketing activities are evolving. So you have to keep track that. So it's not a direct answer to your question. I'm going to turn it now over to Erez, but there isn't a pat answer.
So let me step back and say I'm always surprised by the number of marketers who don't have access to this data on a daily basis, who don't know the answers to these questions as they come up. This cannot be a BI holding a ton of data somewhere that you pull in once a quarter and figure out the numbers for. So first, before thinking of standards, think of transparency in the organization. How do I have the right set of tools that allow me to get this data in real time about my business? These things change on a daily basis. These things are affected by sentiment, they're affected by changes you put on your website, and frankly affected by every piece of content you put out there, whether it's on your blog, website, or syndicate. So first, make sure you can baseline, make sure you can measure in real time. And I think you called out great metrics here. Think about leads. Visitors may be important to your business, but leads are the key goal. Think about that level. Think about leads. Think of visits that turns into sales. I love that. Think of the end-to-end view. A visit is only worth so much, but how well does it do, and the end-to-end process goes into my CRM, how many of those visits actually turn into sales? Think of specific referrals. Think of validated, or what we call sales-ready leads. Don't be thinking about, well, it's just about the visitors and page views, but go deeper and deeper in your sales process. Make sure you can understand and have that visibility in real time. In terms of standards, again, I think standards are industry specific. Frankly, they're seasonal. They're about the new products you put out there. I'd be wary of calling out a number that says this is the standard. What you want to make sure is get a baseline, start measuring based on that baseline, and grow that baseline over time.
All right. Thank you, Erez. And Christine, here is an easy question for you, Erez. Does for free include requiring registration? I'm assuming that means to your 14-day trial.
Well, let me try to answer. I'm thinking, well, for free, I think I highlighted where you're going to provide content for free. You're going to let them read your content without charging for it. You're going to give them access to best practices as they come in. Well, does for free require registration? As a marketer, I'm thinking, well, I want to know who the people are. I can actually make the buyer's experience better if they already filled in a form and I don't make them fill in a form over and over again as they get more data in place. I would think hard about registration. What do I really need as a marketer? Do I really need to know their zip code, industry, number of employees, company name, company website, or frankly, all I want to know at this point of time is their email, because I'm going to nurture them moving forward. Be very thoughtful around what you ask visitors who come to your website for. As they go through the journey, you may want to ask for more and more data, but the idea is really streamline that process. In some cases, when you really have high-level research material, giving that out for free, if you may, without any registration, could really be impactful in terms of how people think of you and trust you. So you really got to figure out what you need, ask for the minimal set, and make sure you're very clear about why you're asking it and what's the logic behind it.
Okay, thanks. Here's another question for you all. Do you have a process of reviewing website referral data?
Again, what's the process, right? What's the characteristics of the process? I would say if you're in a business or if you're marketing a set of solutions that require a heavy set of process, that requires multiple participants in figuring out how your website referral data is helping you, there's a problem there. It doesn't really fit how we're thinking about the buyer's journey. So first and foremost, streamline that process. Make sure it's easily accessible, it's readily accessible, it's accessible on a regular basis, and it allows you to track the website referral data that matters to you. Over time, you're going to refine that process and learn from that process, but keep in mind that referral website data is important, but it's really key and helps you drive business decisions when you tie it into your CRM process, when you tie it into your end-to-end sales process.
All right, thanks. Here's the next up for you. I'm going to keep them coming. What type of behaviors would you consider as an indication of the solution search stage?
So let me jump in on this one. When I look at behaviors, a classic example would be someone calls you up or connects with you on LinkedIn and sends you an in-mail, or they could do it on Facebook and say, hey, a while back you were looking at re-engineering your processes, around, say, for instance, lead handoff. What did you actually do in that? Can you give me 30 minutes of your time? That is a classic behavior of someone who is in a solution search stage. It's the same thing as someone going to a conference, right? And is the person at the back of the room who raises their hand and starts asking questions about this, that, or the other. They are. Just think of it as someone who's asking lots of questions and who's doing their homework. So you're going to find that those people, and what I look for, right, and what we get, we train our clients to look for, is look for that person that starts popping up in multiple places. And again, this is why this ability to be, having a listening engine and tuning and having a good degree of granularity, so you actually can start to see where this person is start looking to see someone who's popping up in multiple places. One, because it gives you the map of where you need to be, but secondly, you're going to start to be able to determine context or intent from that. based upon the questions that they're posting in, say, for instance, a community site, or, say, for instance, they could be going to a get satisfaction site and doing something there, or they could be going someplace to a white paper and downloading a white paper, or posting questions to a blog post. If you can tune into that, what you're going to start to see is they're starting to go everywhere. White papers are really important, not the marketing kind, and preferably not the ones that are 40 pages long, but, ones that are basically say, here's a problem. Do you want to know how to solve, I'm going to make this up, you want to know how to solve, database security, right? And in that is a case study. That very objective, independent conversation is what that buyer is looking for, and the case study is the icing on the cake because it helps them to visualize, am I like that company in that case study?
So let me give a specific example from how we view visitors and contacts we track in Optify. So on the Optify website, you have very specific calls to action. Start your free trial, 14 days of free trial. Get a demo. Contact me, I'm interested. All of those tell me, well, I'm past this stage and I'm ready to evaluate and purchase. On the other hand, we have a set of best practices. We have best practices around inbound marketing, best practices around SEO, best practices around how to run social media campaigns. When we look at a contact or a visitor and he's reading through these, and I want to exclude someone who's what we call who's more of an extreme case of consuming every white paper you put out there. That's typically not the person in the solution stage, but when you see someone coming in, picking off at a general subject, maybe it's just about inbound marketing, and then sort of diving into specifics like SEO, we know, whoa, we got a solution stage contact going on here. And that helps us determine that. What you could do as a marketer is sort of separate or allow these two kinds of calls to action. One is very specific. Call me now, I want to buy. Start a free trial. That tells you one thing. And the others are more general content offerings that when approached allow you to say, well, yeah, this contact is really about just getting started on his buyer's journey with us.
All right, thank you very much. Here is another question for you. How do you pick the keywords you target for this stage? Are they different than your standard target keywords? That's a great question.
So, the keywords you use are really a reflection of your business goals. So, I think someone was referring to the standard target keywords. Those keywords are typically about my offering. They're about specific products. They're about specific benefits from specific products. And those really target someone who's, again, ready to buy, ready to evaluate. For this stage, it's really about, frankly, similar keywords, but attaching words like best practices, getting started, learning more to those phrases really helps you create a set of great keywords that not only indicate or help you evaluate buyers and where they are in the journey, but also sort of start setting the stage for when they start picking a solution. Because if I have a keyword that's learn more about inbound marketing or how to get my SEO right, that for me indicates, well, someone's coming in wanting to learn. They're very early on. As they mature or move on in the buyer's journey, you see more and more specific keywords. So I would bucket those, or I would create those two buckets of keywords sort of by stage in order to align with what people are looking for in each part of the journey.
All right, and here's a very interesting question, actually. From a little different perspective than we've been looking at. What if you're building a market for something that the buyer doesn't even know he needs yet? Would you treat that differently?
I would not actually go treat that differently because the chances are the buyer and again, it would depend on specifically what we're talking about. But the chances are the buyer has a need, okay, and they're solving it some other way. And they could very well be solving it by doing nothing, or they could very well be solving it by doing it the way they're doing it now. I mean, I'll give you an example. A classic example is there's a lot of discussion around product management, right? Well, there are many tools that are out there with trying to automate product management. And does the buyer have a need? And they're just quite happy using PowerPoint or Word for it, even though it's pretty suboptimal for that use. And so I would always go back to say understand and have that conversation with the buyer. And if you're starting with a new product and trying to create a new market, then the conversation is not going to be so much initially about the buyer's journey that will come into the equation, but you're going to do validation anyway about will someone actually spend money for X, Y, and Z. And if they were to spend money for X, Y, and Z, then what would be the process through which that they're going to go and do the research that particular decision? They are going to go through the buyer's journey. The challenge will be they will have not thought out what websites to go through, so you get to influence and maybe join in on that discovery process. But they're still going to go through that exact same process. You just need to start it further up in your process when you start to do your primary research to validate that this market actually exists and it's going to be big enough. And that's a great time to start asking questions. If you were to go and buy this, how would you go about that process? Where would you go? What keywords would you type in? What would you look for? So, yes.
All right, thank you very much. That is all the time we have for today. Thanks, Christine and Erez, really for some really great information on that solution search stage. And thanks, audience, for the great questions. You can visit them again at optify.net and, of course, use that little widget on the bottom of the page. Search Marketing Now has another webcast coming up tomorrow, as a matter of fact, on content freshness, so please join us for that as well. You can sign up at searchmarketingnow.com. That is all for our broadcast today. We look forward to seeing you here next time right here at Search Marketing Now.